Democratic leader.
Minutes to Senator Booker and 2.5 minutes to Senator Kaine. In reverse order.
Senator from Virginia.
I applaud the comments of my colleague from Georgia deeply. My first job after school was in Macon, Georgia, working for a federal judge, Lanier Anderson. And I learned a lot about integrity and a lot about law from him. I also learned some sad lessons that in the history of Georgia, and indeed Virginia and many states, so many people, especially people of color, have been disenfranchised over the course of our history. Our late friend, John Lewis, congressman from Georgia, was savagely beaten on Bloody Sunday just for marching for voting rights. That act of violence inspired this body, the U.S. Senate, to come together in March of 1965 and work to pass, in a bipartisan fashion, the Voting Rights Act. We should be coming together today after acts of violence as a United States Senate to affirm the votes of all who cast ballots in November.
We had a whole summer of violence,
idiot. Contemplating an unprecedented objection that would be a massive disenfranchisement of American voters.
No, not objecting is.
The Georgia result was very clear. A 12,000 vote margin, 2 certifications by Republican officials, 4 separate recounts and canvasses, 7 lawsuits, as in the other states. If we object to results like this, the message is so clear. We are saying to states, no matter how secure and accurate your elections are, we'll gladly overthrow them if we don't like who you voted for.
No,
but
that's
more
not what you're saying.
What we'll be saying, really what we'll be doing, is as the body that acted together to guarantee Americans the right to vote, we will become the agent of one of the most massive disenfranchisements in the history of this country.
What about the 74+ million people on our side who you're disenfranchising, you goddamn idiot? No,
and I yield to my colleague from
don't
New Jersey.
oppose.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. Vice President, I can only think of 2 times in American history that individuals laid siege to our Capitol, stormed our sacred civic spaces, and tried to upend and overrun this government. One was in the War of 1812, and the other one was today. What's interesting about the parallel between the two is they both were waving flags to a sole sovereign, to an individual, surrendering democratic principles to the cult of personality. One was a monarch in England, and the other were the flags I saw all over our Capitol, including in the hallways and in this room, to a single person named Donald Trump.
It's not Donald Trump.
This had difference between these 2 times is one was yet another nation in the history of our country that tried to challenge the United States of America. But this time, we brought this hell upon ourselves.
Yes, you did. But not for the reasons you're about to say.
My colleague from Texas said that this was a moment where there were unprecedented allegations of voter fraud. Yes, that is true. They were unprecedented when the president, before the election even happened, said, if I lose this election, then the election was rigged. That's unprecedented. It's unprecedented before the night of the voting, even the counting of the vote was even done, that he called it rigged. And it's unprecedented that he's fanning the flames of conspiracy theory to create a smokescreen in this nation to cover what he is trying to do, which is undermine our democratic principles. But it's not just that. The shame of this day is it's being aided and abetted by good Americans who are falling prey.
Oh,
Who are
cry me a
choosing
river.
Trump over truth.
How about truth over
Who are
you?
surrendering to the passion of lies as opposed to standing up and speaking truth to power, who are trying to fundraise off of the shame of conspiracy theories as opposed to doing the incalculably valuable patriotic thing to speak truth to our nation.
We are speaking truth. You're the liars, you stupid
Our
fuck.
democracy is wounded, and I saw it when I saw
Oh,
pictures of yet another insurgency, of a flag of another group of Americans who tried to challenge our nation. I saw the flag of the Confederacy there.
Okay.
What will we do? How will we confront this shame? How will we confront this dark second time in American history? I pray that we remember
They
a
found the
Georgian.
faces of Antifa people in the goddamn
His
Capitol
words,
building.
all I can
On
say
the
is
cameras.
we must in spirit join together like those
This was done on
Georgians
purpose.
on a bridge called the Edmund
turn you
Pettus, who
fuckers.
joined hands, who were called threats to our democracy, who
To
were
make it
called
so you can't fucking vote
outrageous
for
epithets
these things.
when they
to be
sought
looked
to
at.
expand our democracy, to save it and to heal it, when they joined arm in arm and said what
was a
we should
purposeful
say
ploy.
now, commit ourselves to that ideal, that together we shall overcome.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I yield up to 5 minutes to the Senator from Nebraska, Senator Sass.
Senator from Nebraska.
Mr. President, thank you. And Mr. Vice President, let me just say before I begin, thank you for the way you have fulfilled your constitutional duties and your oath of office today. It obviously hasn't been easy. Colleagues, today has been ugly. And when I came to the floor this morning, I planned to talk about the lesson of 1801, because I'm kind of a history nerd. And I wanted to celebrate the glories of the peaceful transition of power across our nation's history. Feels a little naive now to talk about ways that American civics might be something that could unite us and bring us back together. 1801 blew everybody's mind all over the world, by the way. John Adams loses to Thomas Jefferson, and Adams willingly leaves the executive mansion and moves back to Massachusetts, and Jefferson peacefully assumes power. And people all over Europe said, that must be fake news. Those must be bad reports. There's no way in the executive would ever willingly lay down power. And yet Adams, in defeat, did something glorious to give all of us a gift. I wanted to celebrate that, and it feels a little bit harder now. This building has been desecrated. Blood has been spilled in the hallways. I was with octogenarian members of this chamber that needed to have troops and police stabilize them to get down the stairs at a time when a lot of our staffs were panicked and under their desks and not knowing what was going to happen to them. It was ugly today. But you know what? It turns out that when something's ugly, talking about beauty isn't just permissible. Talking about beauty is obligatory in a time like that. Why? Why would we talk about beauty after the ugliness of today? Because our kids need to know that this isn't what America is. What happened today isn't what America is. They've been given a glorious inheritance. This is the 59th presidential election. If the vice president wasn't the chair, and if the president pro tem was, I'd have made some joke that Chuck Grassley has voted in 2/3 of those 59 presidential elections. He's laughing. It's not as good as Hit Dear, Dear Dead, but it's still got a Grassley laugh. I don't think we want to tell the Americans that come after us that this republic is broken, that this is just a banana republic, that our institutions can't be trusted. I don't think we want that. We don't want that in this body. We don't want that in our hometowns.
And why are you
I
not
don't think we want to tell our kids that America's best days are behind us.
They are, if
Because
you're in
it's not true. That's not who we are. America isn't Hatfields and McCoys, blood feud forever. America's a union.
Yeah,
There's
well, it's
a
not
lot
going to be
that's
one for
broken
long
in this country,
if it's going to be like
but
this.
not anything that's so big that the American people can't rebuild it, that freedom and community and entrepreneurial effort and that neighborhoods can't rebuild. Nothing that's broken is so big that we can't fix it. Generations
We're trying to fix it.
of our forefathers and our foremothers, probably not a word, our ancestors, have spilled blood to defend the glories of this republic. Why would they do that? Because America is the most exceptional nation in the history of the world, and because the Constitution is the greatest political document that's ever been written. Most governments in the past have said might makes right, and we saw some of that hooligan nuttery today. Might makes right. No, it doesn't. God gives us rights by nature, and government is just our shared project to secure those rights. America has always been about what we choose to do together, the way we reaffirm our constitutional system, where we've got some governmental tasks, and we all in this body could do better at those governmental tasks, but the heart of America is not government. The center of America is not Washington, D.C. The center of America is the neighborhoods where 330 million Americans are raising their kids and trying to put food on the table and trying to love their neighbor. That's the center of America. We're not supposed to be the most important people in America. We're supposed to be servant leaders who try to maintain a framework for ordered liberty.
And you
so
don't
there's
do
a
it.
structure that back home where they live, they can get from the silver frame of structure and order to the golden apple at the center, as Washington would have said it, which is the things that they build together. The places where they coach Little League, the places where they invite people to synagogue or church. Sometimes the big things we do together are governmental, like kicking Hitler's ass or like going to the moon. Sometimes there is governmental stuff, but the heart of America is about places where moms and dads are raising kids, and we're supposed to serve them by maintaining order and by rejecting violence.
What about
You can't do big
maintaining
things like that if you hate your neighbors. You
things that are
can't
not
do big
communist,
things
socialist?
together as Americans if you think other Americans are the enemy. Look, there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. I get it. There's a lot that does need to be rebuilt. But if you're angry, I want to beg you, don't let the screamers who monetize hate have the final word. Don't let nihilists become your drug dealers. There are some who want to burn it all down. We met some of them today, but they aren't going to win. Don't let them be your prophets. Instead, organize, persuade, but most importantly, love your neighbor. Visit the widower down the street who's lonely and doesn't want to tell anybody that his wife died and he doesn't have a lot of friends. Shovel somebody's neighbor. Shovel somebody's driveway. You can't hate somebody who just shoveled your driveway. The heart of life is about community and neighborhood, and we're supposed to be servant leaders. The constitutional system is still the greatest order for any government ever, and it's our job to steward it and protect it. Let's remember that today when we vote.
You're not protecting it. You're corrupting it.
Democratic leader.
Boy, Senator Durbin.
Senator from Illinois.
In March of 1861, a Springfield lawyer caught a train to Washington. His name was Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't his first trip here. He'd served as a congressman 15 years before, and he returned in the beginning of the Civil War to serve as president. It was a different place than he knew it as congressman, and 15 years had changed a lot. The Spriggs boarding house across the street, which is now the Library of Congress, was gone. And this building was changing. Big changes. They're building a dome on the Capitol. But they were also in the earliest days of the war, and President Lincoln was counseled, stop building the dome. It costs too much money, and we can't spend any more time on it. He said, no, we're going to build that dome, and we're going to finish it. That dome and this building will be a symbol of this country that will survive this Civil War and come back strong. So they built the dome, they won the war, and since those days, that dome and this building have been a symbol to this country, a symbol of unity and of hope. Tourists come through here before COVID-19 by the tens of thousands. And if you've ever noticed their tours, they're often shushed. People are saying, show some respect for this building. We know this building in the Rotunda as a place where some of the greatest American heroes of both political parties lie in state, and we go there to honor them. We know this building because we work here. We enact laws here that change America.
Yeah,
we gather
the wrong
for
way.
State of the Union messages from presidents and honor the people in the gallery. This is a special place. This is a sacred place.
And you're destroying it and
But this sacred
desanctifying
place was desecrated by a mob today.
it. Which I've said
on our
before.
watch. This temple to democracy
Done on purpose
was
by
defiled
people
by
to make it
thugs
so that you guys
who
have an
roamed the
excuse.
halls and sat in that chair, Mr. Vice President, the one that you vacated at 2:15 this afternoon, sat and posed for pictures, those who were roaming around this chamber. What brought this on? Did this mob spring spontaneously from America? No.
They're Antifa.
This mob was invited to come to Washington on this day by this president for one reason, because he knew the Electoral College vote was going to be counted this day. He wanted this mob to disrupt the constitutional process which we are part of. This mob was inspired by a president who cannot accept defeat.
No, we can't
If you
accept
wonder
cheat.
whether I'm going too far in what I say, just read the transcript with the Secretary of State from Georgia and listen to this president's wild conspiracy theories, one after the other, swatted down by that Republican elected official and his attorney as having no basis in fact.
Because they're fucking on the take and they're
This president
idiots.
begs, he coaxes, he even threatens that Secretary of State to find the votes he needs. In any other venue, that would be a simple, obvious crime.
No, he didn't ask him to
The
find
lengths
the
he'll go
votes.
to are obvious. The Texas senator says to us, well, many
listened
people
to
still
it.
agree with him, you know, when it gets down to the bottom line. Many people have fallen for this presidential position that it must have been a rigged election if I lost. Well, I would say that after we've lost count, 57 lawsuits, 62 lawsuits, I've heard so many numbers, after 90 different judges, after this president took his case, the best he could put together, to the highest court in the land across the street, where he had personally chosen 3 justices on the Supreme Court.
They didn't
I say
hear the
to the
case.
Senator from Texas, you know much more about that court than I do. I don't believe they let that paper that he sent up there even hit the desk before they laughed it out of the court.
No, they
And that's
didn't
the
hear
best he
it
had to offer.
because they don't
No
want
evidence
to.
whatsoever
Because they're
of
on
this
the take
rigged
like
election
you
and
are.
this fraudulence. The senator from Texas says, we just want to create a little commission. 10 days, we're going to audit all the states, particularly the ones in contention here, and find out what actually occurred. And it really draws its parallel to 1876, Hayes and Tilden. Don't forget what that commission, that so-called political compromise, achieved. It was not just some ordinary governmental commission. It was a commission that killed Reconstruction, that established Jim Crow, that even after a civil war which tore this nation apart, it re-enslaved African Americans. And it was a commission that invited the voter suppression we are still fighting today in America.
What about our suppression? What about suppressing
Let me
us?
close by saying this.
That's what I want to know, dude.
The vote we're going to have here is a clear choice
Yeah.
of whether we are going to feed
Commission.
the beast of ignorance or we are going to tell
You
the
are the
truth
beast
to
of
the American
ignorance.
people. We saw that beast today roaming the halls. Let's not
No.
invite it back.
No, you did not see that beast. You saw a
Majority
purposefully made
President, I yield up to 5
Fake
minutes to the Senator
false
from Kansas,
flag.
Senator Marshall.
Senator from Kansas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Freedom of speech and the freedom to protest are provided in our Constitution. And while I share the same frustrations many Americans have over the presidential election, the violence and mob rule which occurred at the U.S. Capitol today and across the country over the past year are unacceptable, and I condemn them at the highest level. And like all of us in the chamber, I'm thankful for the heroic law enforcement officers who worked feverishly to restore order so that we get back to the electoral certification process. During my 29-year career as an obstetrician and gynecologist, too often I had to sit down with patients and give them a very bad diagnosis. It might have been a young mother of 3 who I delivered all 3 of her babies, now with metastatic breast cancer, or perhaps another woman with advanced cervical or ovarian cancer, all with a very challenging prognosis. But before I sat down with each one of those patients, I carefully reviewed all their labs, their x-rays and their pathology to make sure I had the facts straight. But at the end of the day, my final recommendation was always going to be a recommendation from my heart. I want my fellow Kansans and all Americans to know that I've given as much consideration and thought surrounding the issue objecting to a state's electoral college votes as I did considering the treatment plan for a serious health concern, and today's decision, once again, is from my heart. Mr. President, I rise today to restore integrity to our republic, and I rise to join the many of our colleagues who are all concerned for current and future generations. We must restore faith and confidence in one of our republic's most hallowed, patriotic duties, voting. There is no question our U.S. Constitution empowers state legislatures to execute free, legal, and fair elections. Unfortunately, in several states, the clear authority of those state legislatures to determine the rules for voting were usurped by governors, secretaries of states, and activist courts. Our laws and Constitution should always be followed, especially in a time of crisis. I don't rise to undo a state's legally obtained electoral college votes. Rather, I rise in hopes of improving the integrity of the ballot to hold states accountable to the time-proven constitutional system of the Electoral College. This is why I urge the formation of an electoral commission to give constructive suggestions and recommendations the states can make to make our elections once again safe, free, and fair after a year of jarring irregularities.
There you go.
We must and will have a peaceful transition to power. To all my fellow Americans, I have no doubt that our republic can go stronger through this difficult day. May God bless this great republic. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Democratic leader. Senator from Illinois.
President, in 2004, I packed up my rucksack, laced up my boots, and deployed to Iraq, ready to sacrifice whatever was asked of me, all because I loved this nation, willing to sacrifice my life if needed. Because I believe in the sanctity of our electoral system, which had declared George W. Bush my commander-in-chief. I earned my wounds, proudly fighting in a war I did not support, on the orders of a president I did not vote for, because I believed in, and I still do believe in, the values of our nation, because I believe in a government of, by, and for the people, where voters choose who leads them, not the other way around. I have spent my entire adult life defending our democracy, but I never thought it would be necessary to defend it from an attempted violent overthrow in our nation's own Capitol building. Well, I refuse to let anyone intent on instigating chaos or inciting violence deter me from carrying out my constitutional duties. You know, when my Army buddies and I raised our right hands, when the 45,000 troops in Arizona raised their right hands and swore to protect and defend the Constitution, we did not qualify our oath by saying that we follow orders only when the commander-in-chief was someone whose election we were happy with. Just like when every senator in this chamber was sworn into office, we didn't mutter under our breath that we discharged our duties only when it served our political interests or helped us to avoid the wrath of a petty, insecure, wannabe tin pot dictator on the precipice of losing power and relevance. No, there is no ambiguity here. Joe Biden won the election with a record number of votes.
Bullshit.
Republican officials nationwide confirmed those results, including in Arizona, as has judge after Trump-appointed judge. Even Trump's Attorney General admitted that the United States Department of Justice had not found widespread fraud that would have affected the outcome.
That's because they hadn't looked into it yet.
Yet still, many of my Republican colleagues are asking us to ignore all of that. With no evidence of their own, they're asking us to ignore court rulings, ignore Republican election officials, and even worse, ignore the will of the people across this vast, great nation. By trying to overturn this election, they are placing more trust in Reddit conspiracy theories over the Constitution, proving that appeasing Trump is more important to them than protecting the most basic tenet of our republic, the adherence to free and fair elections.
No.
There's one thing I
It's
know.
not about Trump.
It's that my troops didn't sign up to defend our democracy in war zones thousands of miles away, only to watch it crumble in these hallowed halls here at home. Yet that is what this effort amounts to, an attempt to subvert our democracy, and in the process, it is threatening what makes America American. Because in this country, the power of the people has always mattered more than the people in power.
Bullshit.
That is the ideal that this nation was founded upon.
Yeah.
That is why a few patriots threw some tea in Boston Harbor, why Washington crossed the Delaware,
Exactly
why
my point.
suffragists were arrested a century ago, and why my friend John Lewis crossed that bridge in Selma in 1965. It is why millions spent a Tuesday in November standing in line, braving a pandemic to make their voices heard.
Pandemic?
Listen, this administration has always had an adversarial relationship with the truth. Trump always cries conspiracy, always foments chaos whenever something doesn't go his way.
That's because it's
But
true.
today, we here in this chamber have the opportunity to prove that here in this country, truth matters, that right matters,
Are you talking
that
about my
the will
channel?
of the people matters more than the whims of any single powerful individual.
What about the people?
I have no tea to throw in Boston Harbor tonight,
No, we are the
And I
tea
regret-
throwers.
but I have no rucksack to pack for my country. No Black Hawk to pilot. Nor am I asking for any grand gesture from my Republican colleagues.
Why are you being a
All that
cryberry?
I'm asking of you is to reflect on the oaths that you have sworn, on the damage done to our union today, and on the sacrifices made by those who've given so much to this nation. From the service members at Fort Huachuca and Marine Corps Air Station Yuma to the marchers who bent America's moral arc a bit more towards justice with every single step that they took, every bridge that they crossed. Then ask yourself whether the democracy they were willing to bleed for, the country that each of us in this chamber has sworn to defend, is worth damaging in order to protect the porcelain ego of a man who treats the Constitution as if it were little more than a yellowing piece of paper.
What the fuck are you talking about,
I
you
think we all
stupid
know
fuck?
the right answer.
No, you're an idiot.
Majority Leader.
Boo! Corrupt bitch.
Mr. President, I yield up to 5 minutes to the senator from Kentucky, Senator Paul.
Senator from Kentucky.
I wrote a speech for today. I was planning to say that I fear the chaos of establishing a precedent that Congress can overturn elections. Boy, was I right. Chaos, anarchy. The violence today was wrong and un-American. The vote we are about to cast is incredibly important. Now more than ever, the question is, should Congress override the certified results from the states and nullify the states' rights to conduct elections? The vote today is not a protest. The vote today is literally to overturn elections. We've been told that this is a protest. Well, this is about an electoral commission. No, it's not. It's about whether to seat the electors that have been certified by a state. It's not about an electoral commission. It's not about a protest. You can go outside if you want to protest. This is about overturning a state-certified election. If you vote to overturn these elections, wouldn't it be the opposite of what states' rights Republicans have always advocated for? This would doom the Electoral College forever. It was never intended by our founders that Congress have the power to overturn state-certified elections. My oath to the Constitution doesn't allow me to disobey the law. I can't vote to overturn the verdict of states. Such a vote would be to overturn everything held dear by those of us who support the rights of states in this great system of federalism that was bequeathed to us by our founders.
Traitor.
The Electoral College was created to devolve the power of selecting presidential electors to the states.
But the states are
the Electoral
corrupt.
College is, without question, an inseparable friend to those who believe that every American across our vast country deserves to be heard. If Congress were to give the power to overturn the state's election, what terrible chaos would ensue every 4 years? Imagine the furor against the Electoral College if Congress becomes a forum to overturn states' Electoral College slates. It's one thing to be angry. It's another to focus one's anger in constructive ways. That hasn't happened today, to say the least. We simply cannot destroy the Constitution, our laws, and the Electoral College in the process. I hope as the nation's anger cools, we can channel that energy into essential electoral reforms at the state level.
No.
America's admired around the world.
It's not going to cool. It's only going to escalate.
We absolutely must fix this mess and restore confidence and integrity to our elections. We must.
This election. Not the future ones, this one.
Democratic leader.
Senator from Virginia, Senator Warren.
Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I think like most of us, I'm still pretty reeling from what happened today. What I was going to talk about was the work that I'm most proud of since I've been here, with my good friend Richard Burr and all the members of the Intelligence Committee, about a multi-year report we did into foreign interference in our elections. Probably our top recommendation for that 5-volume bipartisan report was that any official or candidate should use restraint and caution when questioning results of our elections. Because when you do so, you often carry out the goals of our foreign adversaries. Use caution because whether knowingly or unknowingly, and whether that adversary is in Russia or China or Iran, their goals are pretty simple. They want to make it appear to Americans, to folks around the world, to their own people, that there's nothing special about American democracy. I was going to try in a feeble way to maybe reach some of the rhetorical heights of Ben Sasse, and I knew I couldn't do that. So instead, I know I'm violating rules here. Today's the day for violating rules. This is a photo that appears today on one of the most prominent German newspapers. You don't need to draw a pic. You can draw photos from any newspaper or any television feed anywhere across the world. And what is this photo of? It's of thugs. Thugs in the halls of this Capitol.